Follow-up of the presentation that was given on July 25th for the Fall Region 2 Academy meeting. And really the premise of the presentation was to get across the role of a coach at U7 and U8 and what our objective is really at this age. So in order to understand those things, I think it's really important to familiarize ourselves with what's really important to players. And across the board, many studies have been done, many surveys have been done, both here and abroad. And players really play sports to have fun. So first and foremost, they're there to have fun. They like to do something that they're good at, so they want to feel like they're good at something. They want to feel like they're getting better, and they want to roll within a team. That's kind of the social objective there. And they also like the excitement of competition. So what do they need from us? Well, I would say that we need to have fun with them. We need to enjoy the process just as much as they do. If they see that you're enjoying yourself, they'll be much more comfortable, loosen up, and have a lot of fun themselves. Try to create activities in which players can be successful. Sometimes I fall into the trap of trying to teach too much, and players don't quite understand what it is that they're supposed to do, or they may not get it, and that's when they check out a little bit, and that's when we've lost the fun piece. The other thing we want to make sure that we're doing is that we're challenging players. So they want to improve. They want to feel like they're improving. Take a genuine interest in in what they bring to the table. What other things do they do? What's important to them? What do they think about the game? There's a book called Humble Inquiry that does a really good job of explaining this. And a lot of the times when you tell somebody to do something, they don't really like it or they don't feel like they're valued. It's much better in most cases to ask questions. Maybe you don't even know the answer to the question, just get their thoughts and ideas, and they feel like they can be a contributor. They feel like they have ownership in it and that you value them. And the other thing is that, passing a ball back and forth may be great practice to work on technique, but it's not necessarily very engaging, and it may not translate into the game. Without pressure, without realistic, game scenarios, the transference from practice to game may be a little bit limited. So these were player survey results that we took from my club, Metasport. We surveyed players in January, and out of the four options that they had, having fun in the sport was the top across the board for all age groups. Competition and winning ranked last. The other interesting find was that 83% of the players played another sport or activity. So I think it's important to remember that this is a hobby for them. This is their time to have fun. It's not necessarily their life. And the reasons given for liking their team was their coach, their friends, they like learning new things, and they like going to practice. So, players' needs for continued involvement. I would say for players to continue with the sport and players to continue with their team, they have to have great relationships. They have to have a sense of belonging. They have to have something that draws them there. This is true of employees of major companies, adults, whoever. If they have a best friend at work, they're likely to stay, and they're actually likely to report the satisfaction they get from their job is much greater. They want to feel like they're good at what they do, and they want to feel like they're always getting better. So there's really no ceiling on soccer. There's always something to improve on, but I think it's important to remind players the things that they're doing well, and then making sure that we're pushing players into challenging themselves to get better. Also, if you can ever define a purpose or a role on the team, I think that's a good thing. And players end up taking that away. They take it on themselves, and now they've got a job and something to fulfill. So, building relationships through players. As mentioned, the book Humble Inquiry did a fantastic job of explaining kind of how we form relationships, trust, and rapport. And a lot of it starts with that open dialogue, that open communication. So, an opportunity, during a warm up or as players are entering, ask them how their day was, tell them it's good to have them there. Make them feel good, make them feel like they belong, and your practices and things will go a lot more smoothly. I would also ask them a lot of questions about what they think about activities and get as much feedback from these players as you can. They may take something completely different away from an activity than you intended, and it's important to know that. So when you're planning your training, the logistics of the training generally follow these guidelines. Now this may change, but for now, the USSF has recommended that we stick to, about 60-minute session. There's no reason to train for 90 minutes with this age group. 2 sessions a week. You don't need to take over their entire life. I would encourage them to do stuff at home. I would encourage them to get into pickup games, etc. And if they're really wanting more soccer, they can join in, with another team at your club or, maybe another team in the neighborhood. So a warm-up. A warm-up may not look like your typical warm-up that you see on television with older players or professionals. It's fun to run through that stuff once in a while, but for the most part, you're just trying to get them kind of moving, get the new skills on the ball, little tag games, etc. The physical component, this isn't really weightlifting. It's just basic motor skills, crawling, throwing, jumping, catching. This is going to look a lot more like tag games and relay races. Anything that you can do to get them doing different movements is going to build their athleticism for the future. It's going to build their coordination. And most of those games are really fun and not very difficult to facilitate. We are working on technique. However, I would be careful to work on technique in isolation. As discussed before, passing the ball back and forth may be a high repetition of passing and may be an easy place to coach technique. However, it's not generally very engaging and it doesn't necessarily translate into the game when they can pass in multiple directions and they have to make decisions on when to dribble, when to pass, when to shoot, etc. So what I would recommend is that you select activities that give you a high level of repetition within a technical skill. So are there a lot of opportunities to dribble? Are there a lot of opportunities to pass? Are there a lot of opportunities to defend? Are there opportunities to defend in pairs? That's going to have a lot more transference into the big game than training parts in isolation at the expense of all of the other components. So as you get towards the end of the training session, you should really have something that looks like soccer. 4-on-4, 3-on-3, even 2-on-2. But get it to a place where it's directional, and it is more or less what they do during the gameplay on the weekends or weeknight or whatever they may have you scheduled on. So as you're planning your training or revisiting training for a review or reflection, I thought these were the most important aspects of is the activity appropriate? So first and foremost, when you're writing your session, keep in mind that they're there to have fun. So is the activity going to be fun, or is it going to be grueling? Is it too much? Is it too complex? And then, this is also really valuable as a reflection tool. Sometimes you end up writing an activity or, doing an activity. They don't really understand it. It's not complex. It's not smooth, or they just didn't enjoy it. Excuse me. So that's one of the things that happens, and it's important to look at those activities, and there are things that we can change within the structure of the game. We can simplify it or add a point system or something to make it more fun. Are players able to make decisions on their own, or do they have one option? Give them at least a couple of options of things that they can do and let them be the judge of what's most appropriate. At that point, you can talk to them a little bit and ask them what they think, maybe what they would do differently, how they can win the game, etc. And then third, what are the implications for the game? If the game is so far removed from soccer and so abstract, it probably won't have transference into the game. So I think if you're trying to teach wide play, is there, are there opportunities for the ball to get wide? Does it make sense with what you were trying to get them to do within the match? So you're going to need a little bit of help. You're going to need that support group. That's super important regardless of how many years you have in coaching. Most people prefer like this informal form of education. So they like just to talk to people. I would recommend talking with as many people as you possibly can. I would recommend asking a lot of questions, and even people that don't necessarily take your same approach or have your philosophy, and ask them, about their, why they do things. You'll always stand to learn something. The internet's a great resource. We run a blog/website called playercenter.com. There's a newsletter that's involved in that, and it's just kind of the basic concepts. I post some videos and some articles here and there. The coaching manual is a great resource. It's a video library. The visual demonstrations are fantastic, and I would highly recommend a subscription to that, especially if you're just getting started. You're also free to reach out to me, Britton at metasportfc.com, or your technical director or director of coaching. So we've decided as USSF to go with the small-sided formats. It's just a simplified version of the big game. Anytime you add numbers to an activity, you're adding complexity. And so this removes 7 players from the 11-side game, but it still includes width and depth. It still includes so many of the components of the game with a simplified format to create more repetition for decision making, more repetition for technique, a higher level of engagement. If you were to scale engagement in a one-on-one environment, you have 100% intensity and 100% engagement. You get into a 2-on-2 environment, you get about 90 to 80%. And as you go down, into 4-on-4, you may have, 50 to 60% engagement. So they get a little bit of time in action, they get a little bit of rest, and it ends up being really well balanced for this age group. At 8 and under, Region 2 has decided to go with 4v4 format plus goalkeepers to get a little bit of a head start on developing goalkeepers. This is kind of a trial run. We'll see how it goes. So I found a build-out line video through Minnesota Youth Soccer that I thought did a really good job of describing why we have the build-out line. But really the premise of it is we don't want to circumvent development of our players by punting the ball down the field. That doesn't maximize chances for them to dribble, pass, shoot, make decisions, etc. And so we end up skipping a lot of the development that could take place by applying a short-sighted tactic, in order to win games. And so we're taking measures to try to prevent that.
This is a brief explanation of the rationale and benefits of the build-out rules that will be implemented in fall of 2017. The build-out lines create a zone for the goalkeepers to be able to distribute the ball, either from their hands or from a goal kick, to a teammate in close support before being pressured by the opponent. The main purpose of these rules are to develop more individually skillful players and to allow teams to build out of the back. There's already no heading in these younger age games. Now the goalkeeper's not allowed to punt, so by forcing the other team to back up, now a team is encouraged to play the ball short and keep it on the ground. Building out of the back just means that we're trying to advance the ball up the field through shorter passes and dribbling, as opposed to hitting a long ball in the air that players have to fight for, or just humping the ball up the field and hoping the other team makes a mistake that our team can capitalize on. A fringe benefit of the build-out rules is that the defending team now has more realistic soccer decisions to have to make in terms of when and how to win the ball. In the past, a goal kick was really a disadvantage for the team who had just earned it, because the opponent could mostly surround the penalty area with players and have a reasonable chance to win that ball and go right to goal. Another purpose of the build-out lines is to mark where offsides begins to be enforced. This prevents an attacker from cherry-picking or hanging out by the goal. It also allows the backs on the attacking team to move up to the build-out line because they don't have to worry about an opponent hanging out behind them. Hopefully this facilitates more teams moving up and down the field together on both sides of the ball so that players are more vertically connected. To summarize, the build-out rules are meant to create a more skillful game that is more in tune with the modern game at these younger ages. U9 to U11 are really key years for players to develop their technical ability and their skill, and these rules should facilitate more receiving and passing and dribbling for more players on the field. Thank you for participating in this and for all the work you do in the game. Please look for more 2-minute tutorials on MYSA's YouTube page.
So I built a quick video to just demonstrate what it looks like when the ball goes out of bounds and player restarts. So ball goes out of bounds, players retreat, and then once the ball is played, they can press. Again, ball goes out of bounds, attacking team retreats, and then we're able to restart play. So just make sure that everybody understands that the offside rule only applies beyond the build-out line on the attacking half of the field. Ball is played forward. That player receives the ball inside, not offside. A player runs in past the build-out line. Ball gets played forward. That player is offside. So what's next? Be sure to review the rules at thesoccerdistrict.org. Make sure that you're really clear on those, and make sure that your parents are really clear on them. If you plan to continue in coaching, if you plan to continue to coach in U9 and up, make sure that you start the process for your e-license to make sure that you're good to go for next year. The other thing that I would highly, highly recommend is build a season plan. What do you want to accomplish? If you're able to communicate this with parents, you'll better be able to manage the expectations of parents, and they have some idea as to what you're after. A lot of the times they're not going to put two and two together. They're going to want to know why you're doing this instead of this, etc., etc. They want to see what they see on television, and youth soccer just doesn't look like that. The next thing is just make sure that you're enjoying yourself. Coaching U7s and U8s is a privilege, and it doesn't get much more fun than this, and have a blast. Again, for additional resources, you can find the rules and any questions about the logistics of the league on the soccerdistrict.org. League 30 teams, you're more than welcome to go to the League 30 website. We'll answer any questions that we can. Player-centered for coaching resources. There's also athlete education stuff on there, like how to foam roll, how to stretch, dynamic warm-up, etc. ChangingTheGameProject.com has a lot of articles that you'll be able to share with parents and continue kind of the social objective of keeping kids in the game and making sure that we are fostering growth and not diminishing it. And the coaching manual is a coaching resource. They've got great videos, good visual demonstrations, great explanations, and they even have like a season scheduler. So if you're too busy to put together a season plan, or you'd like a little bit of support on that, you can actually just punch in the dates of your season and it'll build out training activities and a whole schedule for you. It's pretty cool.